You're watching the BU Start Now podcast with San Artina. This is your host, Sarah Ashley Neal. Our guest today, based in Toronto, Canada, is a grief counsellor, a coach, and has been a teacher for over 27 years. A straight-talking lady, she speaks on cultivating self-kindness and becoming more self-compassionate by helping people to process their thoughts and emotions as a clarity and critical thinking coach, teaching people how to write therapeutically, as if no one is watching, to declutter their thinking and develop holistic awareness. Known as the Unstucker, let me introduce you to Rosalin Krieger. Hi, Rosalin. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
I'm all right, thanks.
Thanks for invitation to be on your show. Very, very honored.
You're absolutely welcome, and it's really exciting to have you on board. I was doing a little bit of research, as one does on you, and there is so much to you. There's so much information to absorb, and on today's podcast, we clearly won't be able to get through it all. But we'll do our best. We'll do our best. So, where do we start today? I'd like to talk to you about holistic awareness. I love this because I get so fixated on the word holistic, and I think it's so important because when we look at an area of our life, whether it's a practical area or the way we're thinking, sometimes we look at it in isolation and forget that we don't look at the bigger picture. What does holistic awareness mean to you, Rosalin?
I didn't know it was a term. I Googled it last week. One of my supervisors at grief advocacy, she says, tell me more about holistic awareness. And I said, well, everything I do falls under the holistic umbrella. I don't, believe in looking at, when you go to your GP,
Mm-hmm.
they only deal with, in general, with the physical aspects of an illness, whatever you have. They don't take into account your spiritual life, your emotional life. So I knew years ago that the way, even before I began all of my healing from trauma, that a mind, body, spirit approach was best because that's what we are, right? We're not robots. And I think even our family pet has an interior emotional life. But apparently, when you Google holistic awareness, it's becoming a big field now. I had no idea what it was. But as I said, for me, it was just an approach because everything I do, everything I approach is holistic. And I was probably doing it before I even knew what it was. But when I deal with people, when I engage with people that I want to help, it's always holistic. It's never from a fixed mindset, which is a little unrelated. But I really believe, for me, holistic awareness is about being fluid.
Right, that's a good word, fluid.
Yes, and it's really about an embodied experience because we everything we do as human beings on the planet is an embodied experience. But there are people who tend to still separate, which I find puzzling, your mind from your body, from your spirit. And when I mean spirit, it doesn't have to be a spiritual thing, but for me, the more I become aware, the more I meditate, the more I realize that most everything, at least I do, that I'm aware of, has a spiritual component. It doesn't mean you have to be part of any established religious body, but like when I paint and when I'm very present, it becomes spiritual. When I cook and I'm mindful, it becomes spiritual. So then I really feel that I'm really more embodied and therefore holistic.
Excellent. No, that summed it up quite well, because all the work that I do around mindset, about creating a holistic wellbeing mindset, I think sometimes the word can be seen quite fluffy. And if you're talking to a company, I try to remind them that when you're doing a project, or whether you're running the company or whoever you are in whatever role, you're still looking at the bigger picture. You're still going to be looking at where you are now and where you want to get to and what's influencing that. And I think it's a word that even in businesses and companies now is becoming more widely accepted. You work with companies as well, don't you? Have you found that to be true?
Well, I work
Talking
closely with nonprofits, and the
right.
reason I began working with nonprofits during COVID with my therapeutic writing in August of 2020. And and then I approached nonprofits myself in Canada, and I
Hmm.
worked for a little while with Skills for Change. And the reason I first was brought in there to teach newcomers how to network online and how to navigate things like LinkedIn. But I noticed there was a void. There was a
Hmm.
lull, there was a sadness, there was pity in the Zoom call. And I said, I got to figure out what's going on here. Can someone, because only three people had their camera on.
Okay.
And then most of the people who spoke were very depressed. I said, okay, we got to have an honest talk here. And I said, please tell me what's going on. I want to kind of figure out, I want to understand the room. And based on people's responses, I'm not getting enough government help. And my life is horrible. My life sucks. And that was a general, there was a malaise in the room. And I said,
Hmm.
okay, I'm going to say something here. You're probably not going to like it. But if you're with Skills for Change, you're doing well. You have an internet connection, you're doing well. You're getting, as you say, only 500 a month. That's better than zero.
Hmm.
And slowly, a couple of people turned around and said, "Upside now that we're kind of hopefully getting rid of the pity, which doesn't serve anybody. I know from experience, self pity is horrible." I
Mm.
said, "Tell me what you need from me right now." And they said, "LinkedIn." So okay, let's do what you want right now. So I'm able to do on a dime, help people, meet them where they are, and try and
Hmm.
nudge them out of self pity and teach them any skills that I have. So based on that, I was invited back by Skills for Change HR, and they
Hmm.
said, "Please, can you lead us in a wellness workshop? We meet every Wednesday, and lately our staff morale is very down." I said, "Sure." And I came in there. I draw upon a lot of what I've learned through my trauma healing and anxiety coaching. And also I just bring in stuff that makes sense to me. So when someone said, "You know what, I miss being hugged," I said, "How about hugging yourself? Hug yourself." And it actually feels, when you try it now, it actually feels good. When you actually hug yourself, it actually
Hmm.
does feel good. So anytime you touch yourself and hand on heart, you're really, you're halfway to making yourself feel better, right? So I think we
Absolutely.
all know, we all have the tools, but for some reason, I think we think we need someone externally to tell us, when really, once you learn a few things, you really can practice an incredible mental self care, which obviously involves your body. Like there's no mental self care without physically moving your body, stretching your body. Like everything has to be somatic. And for me, as I told you before, it took me 14 months to stop resisting working directly with my
Wow.
body, because as a former academic, as someone who had a lot of resistance, I did not want to hear that I had to connect with my body, because what trauma does is disconnect you from your body. And I felt it was just too unsafe and
Right.
not possible to connect with my body. I thought it was a lot of nonsense. And found out, of course, that I was wrong.
That's really interesting because looking at some of the work that you do, and especially since COVID, I noticed that you've invested more time and energy in yourself during COVID. Did that come about? I mean, I say as an overnight experience, but what actually triggered that during the COVID for you to say, right, I want to look at my mind body connection, the
Well,
way
yeah,
I've
I
been
had
feeling?
to. I realized when I began reading a book called The Body Keeps the Score, which I believe should be mandatory. Like, never mind the Bible at the hotel. They should put the body keeps a score in
I
every
like that. The body
hotel.
keeps a score.
Yeah, by Bessel van der Kolk. And when I read the book, things began to make sense. I didn't know. I knew there was some kind of trauma, but I didn't understand why it felt disconnected from my body. So I told him, and he was so kind. I told him I contacted him on Facebook at the time, and I said, I dropped pictures of myself with my head cut off the rest of my body. He goes, that's it. I didn't
Wow.
understand why, because when I binged, I did not connect. For me, I had no body below my neck, right? Because which helped me distance myself from the damage I was doing to my body. It's still a challenge, but now I'm doing much better, and I fast now, which is an incredible holistic somatic healing tool. So now I've been doing this now. I entered trauma therapy right before the pandemic. And
Hmm.
thankfully, here in Canada, it's so affordable. You can find a therapist for only $50 an hour, maybe even less. And
Okay.
I committed to it. I would go twice a week sometimes. And but again, now I had to do different types of trauma therapy, EMDR, which we can talk about. I had to process a lot of trauma. And then parts work, Fraser's Table, which is a Canadian type of therapy, CBT, and some other stuff. But it wasn't like an uphill trajectory. There were a lot of downs.
Hmm.
But if you commit to it and know that you are going to fail, what's hard for people with trauma is to embrace failure
Right.
and
Yeah.
to challenge their fixed mindset, because their whole life is about survival. Mine was about
Hmm.
survival. And even though being in survival mode kept me safe, it kept me unhealthy, it kept me financially poor, it kept me unfulfilled and jealous of so many people.
Right.
Yeah. So, but now I'm happy to say I see my therapist about once a month, maybe twice. We both realized it was time for me to become less dependent on her and start to practice self therapy, which is so
Hmm.
amazing. Again, I'm still not 100% committed to self therapy on my own, but I do it more than I used to do.
How much time would you say you committed?
Uh, on your own, you often need maybe 5 minutes a day. I mean, where I'm at the stage I'm in, my self therapy consists of a check in.
Hmm.
I see what's going on in my body. I look for tension. Still not good at detecting that, but I am good at,
Right.
okay, what's going on? What are you avoiding? And that's when I have to connect with the various parts that I've been neglecting, hated for many years. And it's all about integrating all those parts, because trauma fragments all of those parts, the
Hmm.
unprocessed trauma. It lands in your body. And so trauma healing is about becoming whole.
And and that leads really nicely into the holistic work because
Yes.
it's about and it's not the expectation that you have to become whole overnight. We are born whole, but how we think of that wholeness is not the same for each of us.
Exactly.
Partly because of our own interests, our own personal interests in our well-being, our
Yep.
own interests in self-awareness and self-discovery. And as you've just said yourself, Rosalind, it can be a little bit scary to actually embark on that journey and
Not
actually
feel
sit
it
down
is.
and
It's
say,
terrifying. It was at
you have.
moments. Whoever's listening, it is terrifying, but necessary. Yes. Yeah.
And I like that word necessary. And do you feel it's necessary in order to move you on from where you are now? Or is it more about dealing with your emotions and actually be able to let go of the past? Because do we actually do we let go of the past? What is it
Well,
about
I
there?
think let go of the past is kind of a little simplistic, to be honest.
Yeah.
What you need to do is you need to engage with the past. But remember, but the past and future don't exist. their constructions. But I find when you're dealing with trauma anxiety, you do have to process things that happened in the past,
Yeah.
and you have to teach that part of your brain that that danger is over. And what you can do is reframe it. There's different. Dr. Peter Levine is very famous for reframing. Famous story about the young woman who was frozen when there was a lion, and then by chance he told her in one session, "Run! You could run! Yeah, you could run from that lion." And she runs, and she's cured. So it's not that for me. It wasn't that easy, but you can if you do any type of EMDR work. There's reframing involved, and you can actually change it when you're in. You take a snapshot of that moment, you process the painful stuff, and then you change the ending. You change the way you feel about that moment. Because, again, back to Dr. Levine, he has this great definition of trauma. Because trauma happens when something horrible happens and there's no one there to comfort you, no one there to validate you. And that
That's
happens to
nicely
most
put.
of us. You don't get the
Yeah.
support. Because that's trauma. Whereas Dr. Gabor Mate, the Canadian doctor, says a cop is just separation from self, separation from your body. And I think they're both right. But definitely, if anyone's listening and you don't know why you're disconnected from your body, it's time to talk to a therapist. It really is time because uh, there's a problem there. It's a red flag.
And it's interesting to talk about. By the way, I've got a little squeak in the chair. I'll try and sit still. It's because I appreciate sort of you're also a grief counsellor and
Yes,
facilitator.
yes.
And something you've also mentioned, we can when do you always know, well, you've just mentioned, but when do you always find that confidence to talk to somebody else? Because sometimes you can say to yourself, I really feel that I need to talk to somebody else. And it's not always talking about talking to the family or talking to a friend. And we don't necessarily go up to somebody in the street as a complete stranger and talk to them. But clearly, when we're talking to a professional therapist, trainer, doctor, that they're a stranger, aren't they? Do you? What would you say to somebody who's thinking, I hear what Rosalin's saying today, I would like to go and talk to somebody? Where do they start? I mean, who do they connect to?
Shop around. You know, so for example, I it was hard for me. I had to tell my psychotherapist who I was with for many years. I have to quit with you because
Okay.
in because there's no treatment in psychotherapy. There's just talking,
Right.
right? And there's also no accountability. So
Accountability.
so I decided to do my research after reading The Body Keeps the Score. It's an incredible resource too. He lists every type of therapy, including yoga, because he wants you to connect with your body.
Hmm.
And you go from there. You can even ask friends and colleagues, who do you recommend? Like I always recommend my therapist. She's fantastic. And and I talked to a couple of people before her, and they just weren't very nice, to be honest. They weren't very nice. And then I found my current therapist, Svetlana Chechel, and you do like an interview, and then you decide. It's like 20 minutes, and then you do an intake session,
Hmm.
and then you see if you work well together. It has to be a relationship in which you
Absolutely.
both mutual respect, but for you, you need to be accountable. You need to show up. If you're not going to show up to your sessions and be present and work
Hmm.
with your therapist, then there's no point going.
And I know you're known for being straight talking in a very compassionate way because we can talk to in English, I don't know if you have this expression, we talk to the cows come home, but it doesn't actually move you forward. And I do agree that sometimes you feel far more comfortable talking to one person than another, and it can take time to find the right person for you. Can I talk to you about your name, Unstucker? I love this.
Yes.
Are you known as the Unstucker, or is it something that is just within your own vocabulary?
We came about. I always before I even began to do this kind of work, I'm a very open person, and people always feel comfortable talking with me to me. And it helps when you talk to anyone, I think, who's worth their salt. They have the ability to look at your situation from a different perspective. And I've always been someone who's been able to do that. And the unstucker came when I was working with my friend Daryl Perry. Daryl Perry was my first really close contact and supporter and helper and friend. We connected around September 2020. I saw him on LinkedIn Live, and I want to talk to this man. And he's very nice. And I asked him, can I be on your show? And then we began working together. And he says, you know what? We're going to call you the Unstucker. Does it make sense because you want to unstuck people? And I said, yes. Now, I don't really use it as much because for a while, last year, I was not unstucking people. Wasn't doing it.
Right.
And I felt a bit upset about that. It does still apply. Like, for example, I created a free online anxiety support group last year, in which I did help unstuck people. But one gentleman gave me an incredible testimonial, and I looked Steve. He came for the whole 6 weeks. He was only one full attendance, very committed. And I think because when I work with people, I'm not judgmental. I don't promise a quick fix. And I invite them to really self-reflect, but with compassion. That seems to be kind of the magic of what I do when helping them get unstuck. But mostly, I help people try to cultivate self-awareness because there's such a lack of awareness. And even I keep becoming more and more aware of my limitations, self-imposed mental limitations. And I wish more people would do that. Just become more self-aware and have the courage to be honest about your limitations, but without, berating yourself.
That word honesty, I think that is absolutely key because accountability, responsibility are fundamental. I think it's also about empowering people to feel able to take that accountability without, like you said, being judged, but also to not be afraid to seek support when they need it. And I think the message I like to share with people is to, just because you're feeling empowered to do things on your own doesn't mean you have to. That self-awareness is what steps in first. That's what we want to, as coaches and professionals like yourself, want to encourage. And it's not about, in your situation, you and them. It's not about saying I've got everything fixed, so I'm going to be your mentor or coach. This is what you do. But it is about using your experiences and being down to earth and honest, and having those honest conversations with yourself and the person you're working with, because they're human. They're not psychics at the end of the day. So in terms of helping people become unstuck, we'll use that for now because that's the word I've been working with. Are there any particular age groups or demographics that you tend to work with more, have had, we'll say, more success, but in your experiences that you've enjoyed working with because it's been invaluable?
Well, I've worked with a full range of people. Like even right now, my two youngest clients are 13 and 14 years old. But I found at the beginning of the pandemic that I really enjoyed working with people in their 70s and 80s because if you live long enough, there may come a time when you can no longer repress discomfort and emotions. And and I had one client, and I have her testimonial. There's a guy, I don't know if you can hear, he's washing the window.
There was some noise in the background.
Yeah, he's washing the window. Problem. Sorry about that. I can't.
Yeah. I love cleanses. That works well. It's holistic. It's fine.
So now her name is, anyway, her testimonial is on my LinkedIn profile. And she said she wants to write a memoir, but she's not quite sure. And so I found that I'm able to help people get clarity about thoughts and emotions, and mostly ambivalence, that'll help them prepare to write a memoir if they want to. But at least they'll, as they come towards the end of their life, they'll have a bit more, I think, mental peace. So we found out, that she was feeling ambivalent about her parents, who were both Holocaust survivors. And she didn't tell me until 6 weeks into our working relationship. She was that quiet about it.
Right.
So, but she taught me to be a very patient writing coach and listener. So I'm really grateful for working with her. Her name was Dagmar. And so Dagmar, by the end of it, she said, I thank you for disagreeing with me respectfully. And so because we hit some points where I said, listen, I have to say a couple of things here. I think none of us has the right to judge anyone who's survived a genocide. I said, you need to think about, I said, your feelings are valid, but I said, I'm hoping you can take the judgment out of how you're trying to process feelings about your parents. Right? So some people tend to dismiss or invalidate their feelings. Oh, it's stupid, it's immature. No, those are your feelings. But you got to separate them from judgment. For yourself,
absolutely,
the person you're feeling them towards. So that for me was very gratifying. I began to do more workshops with seniors, and I like working with all demographics.
You're never too old, never too young.
No,
I think it's your philosophy, isn't it?
Last year was working with a man, very smart young man, but didn't know his values, and that I'm always surprised. I shouldn't be surprised, but so people throw around knowing learning your values. That was big last year. And yet there's still some people who really don't know their core values or why they even chose a certain profession. So this young man didn't know why he chose library sciences. And I said, Ethan, we got to find out why. I go, is there an origin story? It turns out there was. It was the first place as a young gay man where he felt safe.
Excellent.
And I said, and for me too, for different reasons, the library was a refuge. The libraries in Canada, as we said, are still a refuge for so many people, the heart of our communities here. And I said, maybe that's why you chose library sciences. He said, yes, maybe that's why. And now he has a great job in the Maritimes. And so that to me was a great joy to work with him last year.
And at libraries, as we've touched on before, but for this young gentleman, it's also a place that you can give back, because there are, often people at different tables, they're sitting in the library. Some people are reading, some people are just looking out the window. And it's a good place to engage and actually share and have these healthy discussions in a safe place. So it sounds like he found his calling for this moment in time. Anyway.
Yes.
I was looking at one of your YouTube posts, and I found it really relatable, because it was a post on talking about just getting started. So it ties in well with being in a stuck place. But sometimes we do feel stuck, not because we may not know what we want to do or where we want to go. We just don't know how to get started, which is my philosophy. Be you, start now. And I think you were talking in this particular case around, happen to be with women, but it could be anybody, about having more of a presence and feeling more confident online. And more of us are going online now, aren't we? And so whether you're helping somebody become unstuck in a personal situation or in a career, because I know you help people with their career and transitional stages. How did that come about, that video that you put online?
And asking them to get on camera, right? That one?
Yeah, that was getting, and I have to be honest, I found it really useful. It's about 2 or 3 minutes long. And again, for me, is to make it relatable. It's something I know, just get on and do it. But that's easy. It's like telling someone to snap out of it or just to get themselves sorted. Those words don't work, do they?
No,
but your approach seemed lovely and warm.
Yeah, well, like I said, I am unapologetically honest. So I think, and when people write to me like these little notes on LinkedIn, they just, my God, you're so honest. Thank you for being honest. And I feel the more transparency there is on my part dealing with my mental health issues, and also dealing with feeling like you're not enough. You
Hmm.
know, from the moment a female fetus is coming out, she's told you're not enough. Right? You go to the drugstore, the whole drugstore is, especially in Canada, you're not enough. So if they took out every product aimed at girls and females being told you're not enough, all they have left is like cough medicine, you know? Because
Very
and
true.
it's
Makes
getting
sense.
worse. It's getting worse. So for me, it was very hard to get on camera, as I said there, because I felt, I'm too old, too fat. So why bother? I thought, no, the hell with it. I have. It's better for me to look the way I do and share what I'm sharing. It's that is more important than the way I look. So now I still struggle with self acceptance and self love and feeling that I'm enough, but it's very important for women, especially women like me in their 50s, to stake claims and to be seen, because we're still being told, like, we don't want to see you. So and that's why I wanted to share in that video and
I
to say,
see.
please get on camera. End of the day, people who need your help, they don't care the way you look. They don't
No.
care. So please love yourself enough to take a chance. Be real, be human, and get on camera. So that was the message.
No, thank you. Thank you for that, clarifying that. Because for all those listeners who aren't watching a video, this lady is absolutely gorgeous, may I say. And I wish I could. Absolutely. And,
Oh my God.
and, but it's so true. It depends how often we get told it. It depends who we get told it by. And at the end of the day, you could have 100 people say you're beautiful. You could hear another 100 people say you're not. But you have to love yourself and you have to look in that mirror every day, because even though, and I always think this is interesting, we can never see our whole body. Isn't that interesting? We look in the mirror and we can only see a certain angle
Yeah.
at one time. Um, and so we have to assume what's going on behind looks great too, but we've got to love ourselves and we've got to be kind. And for me, I mean, I'm in my 50s and I've been through my own trials and tribulations. um, and I know it's a cliche and people are talking about the word being good enough, but it is a way of explaining this concept that a lot of us, men, women, whoever we are, don't always feel good enough. And sometimes we want to hear it from somebody else, but we also have to be able to learn to say it to ourselves that we are good enough. So yes, so I do want all my listeners to know that this lady is absolutely beautiful. And I'm sure you can go and Google her. There's pictures online.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Very kind.
So I've
But I
embarrassed my lady now.
Yeah, but I think what I learned it. I'm in actually a class now at the University of Toronto called Building Mental Resilience, and
Hmm.
I mentioned we have to do like little write little feedback or notes reports to the professor, and I
Hmm.
told her, I said, I wrestle with still feeling, not physically acceptable enough until I put my makeup on. And she said, I said, Rosie, she says, why don't you try this? And this was nothing new, but she reminded me. She goes, focus on how you feel in your body. So she's right. So take the focus
Hmm.
away from how you physically look
Hmm.
and focus on how you feel. And that's, she goes, for her, that's the important metric. And she's right. So since I began walking daily,
I like
60
that.
to 70 minutes and fasting, I feel a lot better in my body. So now
And do
I
you
want to
do?
train
Sorry.
myself, even though it's hard, because when people aren't feeling enough, it's not just physically enough. In my case, I didn't feel enough because that wasn't reflected back to me in my childhood because of my father, right? So when I'm saying I'm not enough, It's not just the
Mm-hmm.
physical aspect, it's just the whole being. And that's a
The
very
whole being.
old childhood reaction, right? But yet,
Mm-hmm.
it's very hard to deal with. So when people are dismissive of, oh, get over it, it's in the past, you're not helping people. You really aren't. And also, you're in some sort of denial yourself. Like people who are callous were, were often raised by people who were callous, and
Mm-hmm.
they become insensitive themselves. And it's a protection. It's a protective
Mm-hmm.
shield, the callousness, the insensitivity. But if you scratch a little bit surface, you go, there's a wounded child right there. Doesn't take much, right? So when people are being dismissive, I go, why are you? What makes you react that way? What's going on there for you, right? And
Very
then
true.
moments later,
Yeah.
often the person becomes very tearful. Right? So
Yeah.
always be aware, but kind and patient, even to people who are being not so kind and impatient with you.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I think that's very, very true, because as much as we want to have compassion towards ourselves, we don't always know what's going on in other people's life. And I'm talking not necessarily about direct family, but people you meet at work, in the gym, in a restaurant, wherever you are. We don't always know why people react the way they do. And I often think it's not about going out to fix other people. It's about having the patience um, to either not respond the way you may instinctively want to respond, especially if you've been hurt or someone's spoken to you rudely.
Healing your relationship with yourself.
Yes,
This is
yeah,
my life
that's a good way of
project,
putting it.
healing my relationship with myself so I can heal my relationships with other people. No more, no less.
Well, that takes me on, if we've got time, we've still got a little bit of time,
Sure.
if that's okay with you, just to talk about, it's a great segue that onto healing, because some of the practices that you do, that you've both trained in and are finding very helpful to your coachees, is therapeutic writing, isn't it?
Yes.
Um, Now, have you, again, have you always done this yourself? You mentioned the other lady who supported you on that, but
Yeah,
you've,
I've
I
learned it
think,
from Ronna Bloom. She's a local poet, former therapist, and she began offering these poetry workshops to different uh, people in medicine here in Toronto, different hospitals. Now
mhm,
she's, I think, the residence writer for Heart House, which is in University of Toronto. So I began doing her workshops probably a few years ago, and I thought,
mhm,
I think I can do this. And it's only through writing and you can journal. There's different types of therapeutic writing, but only when you write you actually can get the gunk out of your head. When you are feeling
mhm,
overwhelmed, there's two things I say do right away. Number one, find somewhere and just sit and breathe. Deep breathe, slow your breath down. You may also want to
mhm.
get some cold water, hot water, slap it on your face. And then, but if you have more time, just make an appointment and write. Even if it's just a few words, because the moment you get the words down, your anxiety, your confusion lowers. It just will, because it may not make
Yeah,
sense what you're writing, but it's out there. You have to get it out of your head. Now, am I consistent with that lately? No. Again, fully honest. But what I know, but for me, I returned to it days ago because I was still unwilling to do that kind of self care practice consistently. And,
mhm,
but I need to do it. So for me, even if I only write once a week and declutter,
mhm.
the way you declutter your office, your sock drawer, whatever, you also need to declutter your head.
It's a good way of
Before
putting
your
it. Yeah.
sock drawer, before your dresser, your kitchen cupboard, declutter your head. You don't have to go, oh, I can't write. It doesn't matter. You have a pen or pencil. You write down a few words. Write. Just say what's scaring me now.
Mhm.
Write it down. Then you'll actually know what it is. Because if it's staying up there, it's swirling around. But at least once it's on paper, It's out of it's not swirling around anymore, and you're gonna at least know what you're dealing with, and then
Yeah.
hopefully you'll deal with it compassionately. So once on the paper, it's not enough just to get it down. You have to learn how to
Hmm.
engage with what you're writing down.
Absolutely, because they do talk about, well, this is the whole thing with both mind chatter and being inside your head too much, as the cliche goes, and actually getting it down on paper, because it's overwhelming when it's in your head and it can be
Yes,
overwhelming when it's on paper. But at least when it's on paper, it's like if you're maybe slightly different if you're doing an essay or you're writing a long letter. You tend to cut it back and bring out the salient points and
yeah,
make it more coherent. And even if you're writing all this down, whether it's for yourself or whether you're working with a therapist with this information, you want it to be useful. I mean, it's useful
yes.
anyway. We know that stage one, don't we? Getting it out of your head onto paper. But if you are looking at becoming, whether it's unstuck or looking at your emotions and how you manage your responses and reactions in life, whatever it is you're dealing with, you can actually own it. You can pick it up and it's yours, and you can see it, and it becomes more real.
It does.
Um,
You actually have to look at it because people are walking around, and I don't know if I'm the exception. I am fully aware on a daily basis because they keep coming up of all my limiting beliefs.
mhm,
And many of them I thought, oh, that's awful. But you know what? Now it's like, no, don't judge it. So it took me a
yeah,
while, Sandra. I used to go, oh, this is so embarrassing. Oh my God. I thought, you're shaming yourself. You're
mhm,
shaming an old part of yourself. Please don't shame it. This is what you created from the childhood. So, for example, recently, the more I kept making progress, the more fear I had, and that voice said, "You don't deserve self care. You don't deserve to be successful. You're supposed to be scared the whole time." I That's information that I needed to know. So there are
mm,
people on this call listening. Have the courage to write down what you may think is silly, horrific, disgusting. Write it down because you need to know what's
mhm,
swimming around there. You have to know about that software that's playing in the background. Because if you don't, you're making decisions, you're often reacting in very uninformed ways.
mhm.
And once you've got it down, you have the courage to write it down, approach it with curiosity, as my therapist always says, and not condemnation, not like, why me? Why me? Why me never helps
I
anyone.
love that curiosity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Approaching with curiosity, because in essence, that is what you're doing. You're learning something new about yourself. And if you can be curious about that, then you're further forward on that journey,
Yeah,
aren't you?
but something like ugly. You got to be able to sit with the ugly thoughts. And I'm being honest, I have ugly thoughts about myself. But
Yeah.
now at least I can listen to them without going, oh, this is disgusting. So ugly in quotes, right? So you have to have the courage
Yeah.
to listen
Mm.
to that stuff and then say, you know what, you're wrong. No, you know what, sorry, I am allowed to be successful. And I deserve self care. So you have to, in my case, I have to retrain my brain to say, and that takes a while. But
Mhm.
before, I would write them down. Go, okay, I guess you're right. And I thought, no, but it was, no, Rosalin, no, you have to tell it it's wrong. That's wrong.
Mm.
You are allowed to take care of yourself. You're allowed to do all these things. Because I didn't realize I was walking around for a big part of my life, not knowing that I was telling myself, you aren't allowed. You're not allowed. Now I know.
And it's amazing, isn't it, how we find it far easier to tell us what we're not good at, what we're not allowed to do, which is what you've just mentioned, than it is to actually celebrate ourselves each day, celebrate who we are that day, because we know that next day we've got another 24 hours to create something even more magical if we want to.
No, we don't.
Um,
No, we don't. Someone's not going to wake up tomorrow, right? So you only
mhm,
have right now. So I got up this morning. I said, thank you. I am alive today. I'm alive today. And I have a chance now to try and be present because it's very hard for people with anxiety and trauma to be present. Because I'm going to go to sleep tonight, Sandra. I
mhm.
don't know if I'm going to wake up. I don't know that. Not to be
No,
macabre
absolutely.
or pessimistic, but yeah, I mean,
Not at all, because this is the conversation about the show. I understand that, and I appreciate what you're saying there,
yeah,
because I'm passionate about in that moment. This is the time you have. I'm also mindful about when we are being hard on ourselves to remember that this we have another opportunity. We have another
today,
opportunity to.
today.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. We
So,
can
for
have another
example, you can
opportunity
have
for
a shitty
today.
morning, but I would say, you know what? I didn't do so well. I go, but I can. You can end strongly. You didn't do your writing today. Are you still awake? Do it. So you can end strongly.
Yeah.
Be nice to
Hmm.
yourself, but that only happens
Absolutely.
if you're actually aware of your
Well,
internal
this is it.
conversations.
Yeah.
If you don't have the awareness, which most people don't, I don't think they still don't. Like, I don't know why, I'm not going for that job. But many are saying, I don't deserve it. I can't do it. It's too hard. And it's too hard is part of a fixed mindset. Well, things that you want are hard. Okay, Michael Jordan became Michael Jordan because the man worked and trained, and I mean,
Mm.
that wasn't because he was gifted. Okay, but many of us, and me included, we want things often to come easy, without conflict, without discomfort, and that's not how growth or success
Exactly.
happen. So for me, I had to learn that as well. I had to embrace discomfort, the dips, the terror, but knowing this is hard again for people with trauma is that there's an end to it. You're not going to feel awful for the rest of your life. You're going to have moments of happiness, moments of strife. There are
Exactly.
moments, and it's still a hard sell for me, but I'm getting better with that. So I can sit with the pain better now.
Hmm.
So we say in psychology, my window of tolerance has grown, especially the
Hmm.
last 2 months. Don't know why. I'm happy it's happened, which is good. But so if people, your window of tolerance means how much you can tolerate emotional discomfort. Can you sit with it
Okay.
instead of reaching for alcohol, food, or Netflix? Can you sit with it? And I'm getting better at sitting with it.
Good.
Yeah,
No, this is excellent, and I could talk to you for another hour or two on this, and certainly love to have you back on the show, because I
sure.
think it would be great. I mean, I love listening, but there's also the back of my mind, like I said, there's a lot I would like to talk to you about, so that you know. The idea of podcasts is that they're conversational,
Yeah,
and I think there's a lot more tips and techniques that we can bring to the audience in the future. And I think you have been kind enough to share your story honestly, and part of your story, I'm sure. Rosalind, there's been some amazing takeaways from today, and I know we've only just touched the surface. So I really look forward to welcoming you back, if you'd like to
sure.
touch on some of these areas in a little bit more depth. If you could give the audience one takeaway today, or you could ask them to consider one aspect of today's podcast, what would you tell them to take away and reflect on today?
Check in with yourself. Just say, how am I doing? What's going on? What do I need right now? That's it. And you just sit there. You can do it first thing in the morning. You can do it middle of the day before sleep. But check in with yourself. Get to start cultivating a better relationship with yourself. And you can do it at
Excellent.
any stage of your life and do it with patience and kindness, which is what I had to learn because I had nothing but disdain for myself. Oh, God, you again? Like a lot of that. So yeah, just checking with
Hmm.
yourself with compassion
Check in with yourself.
and trust yourself in the process that you will learn how to meet your needs. Yeah,
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's lovely. And to remind also listeners that it doesn't matter the amount of time they do this, as long as they're checking in with themselves, with a couple of minutes, whether they've got
yeah.
10
Oh,
minutes.
exactly. Because
Um,
yeah, very. That's a good point, Sandra. People think you have to do this for hours. No. So people will use the excuse, "Oh, I don't have time." Yeah, you do. If you've got time to watch Netflix, go through the drive-through at your favorite local coffee place, you got time to check in with yourself for a minute or two. And if you're
Beautiful.
not doing
Lovely.
that, ask yourself why. What's keeping me from checking in with myself. What's keeping me from getting to know myself better?
That's actually a lovely note to end that on. Thank you. So where can people find you to learn more about the work that you do?
Find me on LinkedIn. Follow up my name.
LinkedIn?
Yeah, I'm the only Rosalin
Okay.
Krieger in the world, actually. Yeah, I mostly post under Rosalin Krieger art, where I take pictures of my art. And but LinkedIn's probably the best, and my website, which I hardly use anyways these days. But yeah, LinkedIn. Find me.
Wonderful. Lovely. Well, thank you ever so much, Rosalin, for being on the show today.
My pleasure.
Okay, take care. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
And remember, our show is about helping you to create healthier habits in the life you live now until new lifestyle practices change how you live your life. Well, that's it for today's episode. Thank you for watching and taking time out to join us. If you enjoyed the show, it would be really great if you could leave a review. And I look forward to welcoming you back to the show next week. This has been your host, Sarah Ashley Neal.